lonely traveler steps off the train. Wearing a bowler hat, a trench coat, and holding a briefcase, the traveler has arrived in the country of Ihatovo, and soon learns about the 7 missing notebooks of the town's local writer Kenji Miyazawa. Swept away by curiosity, the traveler decides to search for Kenji's missing notebooks and the man himself. Ihatovo Monogatari is a strange little RPG-style adventure game developed by the studio Hect for the SNES in 1993. The game depicts the fantasy world envisioned by Japanese writer Kenji Miyazawa. Ihatovo Monogatari, or Ihatovo Story, is the world in which Miyazawa set many of his fairy tales. The visuals of Ihatovo evoke the illustrations of children's picture books, with humanoid animals that are characteristic of such fairy tales, and the magical realism that erodes the line between fantasy and fact. The pixel character models of the townspeople are realistically proportioned, and their houses are sparsely decorated rural Japanese homes with tatami floors and sliding paper doors. Certain of these individuals have beautifully realized character portraits that feel right out of a children's picture book. Story sequences are brought to life by more detailed pixel artwork that work like storyboards, visually narrating the traveler's experiences or the stories that he hears. The music by Tsukasa Tawada is simply breathtaking, and I was able to get permission from Tawada himself to use his own piano arrangements for this video. The 9 chapters of the game comprise their own subplot, each one inspired by a fairy tale or novel of Miyazawa's, but all of them are connected to the overarching story of the traveler in search of Kenji's 7 lost notebooks and the writer himself. At the start of each chapter, the townspeople have different things to say. Their lives appear to be slowly passing, some of them stay, and some of them go. When the game starts, the traveler has just disembarked from the train in Ihatovo and quickly learns that the famous writer Kenji lives there. Through the traveler's inner monologues, the game is able to reiterate important information to the player and suggest possible future actions to take. The only buttons needed to play the game are the directional controls, the interaction button, and the item menu button. By opening the item menu, taking out an item, and interacting with someone, the player may be able to trigger a special event to advance the story. The game is easy to play, so easy that one Japanese internet writer described it as a picture book with background music for the Super Nintendo. This is not a game to play for the sake of being challenged. Like many other puzzle-oriented adventure games, the game is all narrative. However, unlike those games, the puzzles are never absurdly obscure. By talking to people, the player is able to find out where to go or what actions to perform next. The difficulty comes from figuring out who or what exactly to interact with, and sometimes you have to speak to the same person 2 or 3 times to trigger events. But there's also a dark side of this game. Characters die over the course of the 9 chapters, but as the player reaches the 9th and final chapter, we cross over from this colorful world into a darker and more unsettling dimension. If you read Miyazawa's original fairy tales, you'll find that many of the characters who have happy endings in the game end up passing away in Miyazawa's version. However, by the end of the game, these characters do eventually die, but mostly off-screen after their chapters have ended. In the game's final hour, these characters have all arrived to the Galactic Railroad, inspired by Miyazawa's famous children's novel. But how everyone gets there, and what happens next, is the story of this video. A train travels in darkness beneath stars, through forests and over bridges, bound for Ihatovo. With an empty travelogue, we begin our journey at a quiet station. We learn that tourists ought to meet Kenji Miyazawa, so we explore town, check into the hotel, record our day in a travelogue, and begin talking to the town's motley of residents. There's a cinema, closed for renovation, a foreclosed bar, a building full of mewing cats, a school, and a city hall, where Leo can give regular hints about what to do. At Kenji's house, we meet the members of the Agricultural Society, but one member, named Fazello, tells us that Kenji is away on business. His 7 journals have gone missing. Since we intend to explore Ihatovo anyway, Fazello suggests going to the Shellfire Forest to ask Professor Ursus for more information. In the forest, there are bears, rabbits, and foxes roaming idly. In a bed of flowers, we find a lily of the valley, a monument dedicated to the memory of Homoi, a boarded-up shrine, and a dark cave. In the cave, a vase on the table can be filled with the lily of the valley, after which the hooded figure of Professor Ursus appears. He says to try asking the forest animals where the journals are, but since we can't talk to them, the professor asks for a gift in exchange for help. In town, we learn from Leo at City Hall that Professor Ursus loves poetry. To the south of town, we meet a poet who gives us one of his poetry books, so we give it to Professor Ursus and learn finally about the existence of the Shellfire Orb, which grants the user the ability to speak to animals. The professor gives us the key to the shrine where the orb is kept. Then we bring it to the professor, who explains the previous owner of the orb was a rabbit named Homoi, who was gifted the orb by the king of the Skylarks after saving 2 young birds. This ability makes Homoi into the leader of the forest, but a fox begins to flatter Homoi, convincing him to act selfishly and abuse his power. One day, when the fox kidnaps the birds, Homoi has lost his courage to confront the flatterer. As his courage fades, so does the flame of the Shellfire Orb, until it shatters, blinding him. Though the orb returns to its former state, Homoi is changed forever and lives a sad and lonely existence until eventually dying. After the story, we return to the forest, speak to the animals, and learn nothing about the journals. But they share a rumor that if the Shellfire Orb is placed at Homoi's monument, his spirit will appear and speak to us. We do so. Homoi appears and warns us to be not proud, arrogant, or cowardly. Homoi fades away, and we return to town, not having found a journal. After waking up in the hotel, we learn by speaking to the locals that a local bar has reopened. Now we can also speak to the cats at the cat office, where the stove cat warns us to watch out for the owner of the bar, a giant toad who preys on little alcoholic tree frogs, who are allowed to open up a tab at the bar, but whose alcoholism forces them into debt. After meeting the toad, we go look for Kenji, but he isn't there. In a letter that just arrived, Kenji explains that he'll be gone for a while. While there, we hear about the Queen of the Ants, who is rumored to have one of Kenji's journals. The ant hive is north of town, below a bed of flowers. At the end of a cave, the Queen explains that she doesn't have a journal, but the owner of the bar is rumored to know about one. Her worker ants tell us to be wary of the toad, but we pay the toad another visit anyway. The toad is busy laughing at how deep into debt the little tree frogs are, one of whom has blacked out. The toad says to get lost as we're hurting business. After leaving, we visit Leo, who says the toad is allergic to mushrooms. At the cat office, the stove cat knows where to find mushrooms by the school in town. We find them growing by an ordinary tree, then return to the bar to speak to the toad, who laughs giddily at the idea of the tree frogs becoming debt slaves. As we take out the mushroom, the toad panics. He promises to let the tree frogs go if we don't come any closer. Before leaving, we ask what the toad knows about the journals. In fact, he has a journal and believes it may have brought bad luck, so he gladly hands it over. Afterwards, we learn that the toad's business collapsed, causing him to leave town. The next day, we leave the hotel and learn from the cat office that a boy named Kenju in a nearby town may have a journal. Traveling there, we learn from Heiji, an unfriendly farmer, that the boy named Kenju is sick in the head. Everyone in town is talking about how upset Kenju is. His mother suspects Heiji of stealing Kenju's cedar sapling and burying it in the bad soil, where it will never grow. An old woman in another house explains that Heiji was upset by Kenju planting the cedar sapling where it would grow to shade his field, and therefore stole it. We find Kenju, who is inconsolable. Kenju's dog tells us he knows where Heiji buried the sapling and shows us the location. We dig the sapling out of the ground to find that it's withered. By showing the dead sapling to Heiji, he flees the town in shame for having stolen it. Afterwards, Kenju's mother laments the fact that they can't afford another cedar sapling before remembering that Kenju has often been seen talking to a strange owl who may be able to help. Nesting in a nearby oak tree, the owl has seen what we've done for Kenju. We bring Kenju to the owl, who says to rebury the sapling and wait 7 days. 7 days later, we return to the village to find that a whole grove of cedar trees has started growing. Everyone in town is grateful that we put a smile back on Kenju's face. Kenju thanks us personally. He has a journal and hands it over. As the scene fades, we're told that Kenju's cedar grove continued growing into a beloved forest. In the morning of the next day, we get out of bed and hear that the cinema has been reopened. A Charlie Chaplin film is playing, complete with a live pianist, a band in the back room, and a whispering audience. Over at the cat office, we get news of a fox who has a journal of Kenji's. The fox lives in the forest of the Earth God, and has befriended a delightful birch tree who loves to hear the fox's stories about Western science and technology. We ask the fox about Kenji, but the fox appears not to know very much, or so he says before wandering off to pick grass. By a nearby lake, the Earth God is furiously pacing his hut. Offended by our unannounced visit, he punches us in the face. Hours later, we awake to find the fox and the birch tree chatting about the stars. The next day, he promises to bring a telescope for the birch tree to use and interesting books to read. The fox goes home, the Earth God appears, and spews vitriol about the fox to the birch tree, who defends him. The Earth God runs off, upset, but he appears to have warmed up to us. We return to the fox, who says to come back tomorrow. The next day, the fox isn't anywhere to be found, and the Earth God isn't in the mood for visitors. Back in town, we learn from the stove cat that the Earth God loves dumplings. Conveniently, a woman in town has just made too many dumplings and gives us one. By giving the dumpling to the Earth God, his mood improves. Then we visit the birch tree, but the fox is already there to discuss philosophy. Hearing everything, the Earth God runs off in a fury. He seems to have an inferiority complex and feels jealous of the fox for stealing the birch tree's attention. Suddenly, he runs out screaming. We give chase, but we're too late. The fox's dead body lays outside the hut, beaten to death. In his hand there's wild grass, which also fills the hut. Inside there are no books, but only a regretful Earth God. Before leaving, we check the grass on the table and find one of Kenji's journals, then speak to the birch tree, who's concerned because the book she borrowed from the fox has turned into grass. He was a fraud. Liars will end up being hurt by their lie, the story tells us, perhaps suggesting that the fate of liars to be hurt by their lies is as natural as the earth itself. Disturbed, the weary traveler returns home. The next day, we hear from Leo that people are worried by the cold weather this summer. Another letter arrives from Kenji. He's meeting with a scientist, Bud Gusko, at the volcano research facility to describe the strangely low temperatures. In the town by the facility, we listen to the residents' concerns about the cold weather's harm to their crops. However, the security guard won't let us into the facility. One of the townspeople remarks that Professor Kubo from the school in Ihatovo is deeply respected at the facility, so we visit the professor and learn that he's been worried as well. He theorizes that the fastest way to increase the temperature is to raise carbon dioxide levels. After telling the professor that we want to meet Bud, he writes a letter of introduction for us to get past the security guard. We use it, only to learn from Bud that Kenji has just returned to the Agricultural Society. We go there, but too late, Kenji's gone again. He's left a letter for us though, thanking us for collecting his journals and asking us to assist Bud. The professor shows up at the facility to lend help as well, and they discuss placing explosives around the volcano to release the crater's carbon dioxide gases. Deciding to give it a try, they agree to meet at the house of Bud's sister, Nellie, the next day. We arrive bright and early at Nellie's house, who says to meet Bud and the professor at the boat outside, which carries us to the island of the volcano. Nellie watches from shore as we sail off, arriving shortly afterwards on the island, where the explosives are quickly set into place. However, Bud decides to stay behind, as someone needs to flip the switch. Not liking the idea, we try in vain to persuade him otherwise, but the fact remains, somebody needs to flip that switch. We leave, sailing back to safety, and tell Nellie the tragic news. Bud's about to die, but he's a hero. Suddenly, the volcano explodes. releasing clouds of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. The next day, Nelly pays us a visit and gives us one of Kenji's journals, and that fall Ihatovo was blessed with a harvest bigger than usual, all thanks to Bud. After having a good rest, we check out the Love movie playing in town, then get information about a local entrepreneur owning a collection of rare journals. We head over and find that Mr. Osbel, the richest man in Ihatovo, has recently befriended a white elephant who loves the satisfaction of a hard day's work. Osbel's busy thinking of a way to make more money out of the elephant. We go back to town and tell Leo about Osbel's questionable plans, after which Stovecat says Osbel would do anything for money. While in town, we find that the Toad's bar has reopened and he's back at his old ways. We go back to the Osbel mansion, explore the area, and find other elephants in the forest who are worried about the white elephant, but happy to know their friend is living out his dream of doing satisfying work. Indeed, the elephant is happily resting in the stall, drinking cold, delicious water, and feeling good after a day's honest labor. Osbel's human workers are impressed by the elephant and grateful now to have easier jobs. Before leaving, Osbel asks for a favor. He wants to gift the elephant a tin clock. We ask Leo, who says that the Toad probably has one at the bar. He does, and offers the clock at no cost, as he's been trying to get rid of it anyway. Finding the clock behind the bar, we deliver it to Osbel, who promptly places the clock around the elephant's neck, making the elephant heavier. Not satisfied, Osbel asks for another favor, a pair of shoes for the elephant. In town, Leo has no idea where to find such large shoes, but the Stovecat says Fazello can probably make them. He can, and promises to finish by next morning. As the sun rises, we go to pick up the shoes. Before giving them to Osbel, we visit the white elephant, who exclaims that he's desperately tired. Nevertheless, we give Osbel the shoes, who adds weight to them so as to make the elephant's work yet harder in an attempt to make him stronger. Osbel's human workers and family members are feeling bad for the elephant, but don't know what to do. We leave town, 7 days pass, and return at night to find the white elephant in a horrifying condition. Worked to the bone and suffering horribly, the white elephant feels that he is near death. Osbel laughs gleefully at the money being raked in. Now the white elephant begs us for help. So heading into the forest, we find the black elephant and tell him everything that's happening. Shocked at their friend's terrible fate, they stomp their way to Osbel's mansion, decimating it. Everything is completely destroyed, but the elephants, who know that Osbel collected rare journals, encourage us to search the rubble, and sure enough, one of Kenji's journals is among the debris. Osbel did not survive the stampede, but we learn there will always be other Osbels. The sun rises, and we get out of bed to learn from the townspeople that tomorrow is the day of the music festival. In the cinema, the local orchestra is preparing for a competition being held, but Leo hears a rumor that Ghosh, the cellist, is performing badly these days. Unfortunately, the Stovecat's caught a cold and won't be in attendance. We learn that Kenji often visits Ghosh the cellist, but the Stovecat doesn't know where Ghosh lives. At the Toad's bar, one of the tree frog knows that Ghosh lives by the watermill, so we head over, talking to everyone in town, and learn that Ghosh has lost his talent, perhaps because the bird he loves to practice with is sick. At Ghosh's house, a cat explains that the cuckoo bird has a sore throat, and since then, all of the musical animals that used to sing with Ghosh have stopped coming. We meet the cuckoo bird in one house who can barely get a few notes out. Nearby, we pick the chrysanthemum growing by the river, then head back into town, where Leo tells us to check out Ghosh practicing at the cinema. We find Ghosh in the back room, struggling to play his part. Afterwards, the Stovecat lets us know that chrysanthemums can be turned into medicine. An old woman in Ghosh's town knows how to make this medicine for us, after which we give the medicine to the cuckoo bird, who immediately begins to sing. We go to find Ghosh at the cinema, which is now empty and eerily quiet because everyone's gone home to rest. Ghosh is at home, practicing cello beside the warbling cuckoo bird and the other singing animals. They play late into the night. The next day, on the day of the festival, we find the cat office closed because the Stovecat is terribly sick, suffering at home beside the stove's heat, feeling dreadful and unable to move. Not knowing how to help, we go to the cinema to find out that Ghosh's band has won the competition, and Ghosh puts on a stirring encore. The people of Ihatovo finally see what a talented cellist he is. In the morning, we return to Ghosh's house to learn that Ghosh has gone on a trip. In a letter, he thanks us for helping the cuckoo bird and gives us one of Kenji's journals in the bedroom chest. The next day, we can feel the weather getting colder. The leaves are changing and the sky is getting dark. We learn from the Agricultural Society that Professor Kubo is back in town. We visit him and hear about his next research project, the Legend of the Galactic Railroad. We express our interest in the project, but meanwhile, Leo tells us about a nearby town that has reported seeing mystical foxes and a mysterious fox village. Leo doesn't know exactly where this village is, but the poet does, tells us how to get there, and we arrive soon afterwards to hear about the townspeople's mixed feelings about having a fox village nearby. Some of the young men fear being tricked by the foxes, but two of the children, Shiro and Kanko, have made friends with the foxes. To the north of town, there are more young men drinking and warning about the trickery of nasty foxes, one of whom we encounter in the town's shrine. Konzaburo is impressed that we can speak fox language, but won't take us to the village. A day later, the stove cat has returned to work, terribly unhappy. The other cats have spread rumors about him being lazy and skipping work. We go back to the town beside the fox village to learn that last night the young men encountered the foxes while drunk, and the foxes tricked one of them into eating horse feces. Furious, the young men vow to catch a fox and take revenge. Meanwhile, Konzaburo still won't take us to the fox village, but after leaving the shrine, we find a young fox with its leg stuck in a trap. With the help of Shiro and Kanko, we release the fox, who runs off into the woods. We tell Konzaburo that the young fox is safe, and he thanks us by inviting us to the Fox Village's winter assembly tomorrow evening. We go home and return at night the next day to the snow-covered shrine. By leading us into the shadows of the shrine, Konzaburo takes us to the village, where all the foxes are having a cozy evening of good food and an entertaining film. After talking to all of the foxes, Konzaburo announces that a special dumpling was prepared for us to show their gratitude. All the foxes watch happily as we eat the dumpling. Konzaburo then expresses his wish that one day the bad reputation of foxes will be forgotten and humans may be able to live peacefully together with them. Finally, he hands over the 7th of Kenji's missing journals, the final one. Content, we head back to the hotel in quietly falling snow. In the morning, we discovered that the cat office has been closed down because the cats were unable to get along. The cinema is closed too, and the town is feeling cold, empty, and quiet. At the Agricultural Society, we read a letter from Kenji, thanking us for gathering his 7 journals. The letter contains a map showing the way to a place where Kenji wants to meet us. We go to the place marked on the map, and find a strange pillar etched with instructions. Spin the wheel, begin to pray, and have your wishes granted. However, the wheel is mysteriously missing. To find out more, we ask Professor Kubo, who's finished researching the Galactic Railroad. To board it, one must enter the 4th dimension, which is possible only by spinning the wheel of the afterlife. Someone knowledgeable in folklore must know what to do, so we ask the poet, who turns out to have an old wheel artifact stored away in one of his boxes. Taking the wheel to the pedestal, we place it on top, spin it, and begin to pray. The light fades. We fall asleep and wake mysteriously in another dimension, a cosmic train station, outside of which there are houses floating in the stars. Inside the station's waiting area, we find Ghosh, who is waiting for Kenji to arrive. In the houses, we see many of the people who we've met during our journey, the ones who have died, like the fox and Ozbel, and Kenju, who died of a fever, and others who turn out to have died shortly after meeting us. Everyone here is dead and waiting for their turn to board the Galactic Railroad. Each of them described their experience of dying. For some of them it was quick, and for others it was slow. Finally, we return to the station's hotel. Upstairs, a man is waiting in his room. It's Kenji. We give him the journals, and he thanks us once again for gathering them. Kenji then informs us that it's time to board the train. Taking us to the station, he enters the platform ahead of us, but tickets are needed to get on. By searching our pockets, we find that a ticket has miraculously appeared, so we hand it over and step onto the platform, where Kenji asks if we'd like to be his travel partner. We say yes and get on the train. All of the other characters are there and have taken their seats. Everyone's excited, nervous, confused, sad, happy, an amalgam of mixed and complicated feelings. Kenji's waiting for us at the back of the train. Where the railroad goes, he isn't sure, but we'll find out together, he says, as the train begins to rumble. Stars in the dark window fill the inky void. Our next adventure has arrived. Kenji Miyazawa dedicated much of his life to improving the lives of farmers in his community, teaching sustainable agricultural techniques and promoting cooperation. Though largely unrecognized during his lifetime and dying young at the age of 37, Kenji is now celebrated as one of Japan's most cherished literary and cultural figures, a sort of modern Aesop or Fontaine. Kenji spent most of his later years trying in vain to convert his family to the Nichiren sect of Buddhism. Nichiren was a Japanese Buddhist who believed that all things contained Buddhahood and the possibility of achieving nirvana in this life, no matter what species they were, doing away with the idea that humans were inherently superior to other animals. Kenji's works depict the curious psychology of a man who's cautiously optimistic and yet skeptical of the transformations taking place in Japanese society. He lived in a period of extreme social change as Japan embarked on a national project of modernization, adopting Western ideas and technologies, and he appears to have seen the good that such a change could bring, but also worried about the loss of something essential and important, symbolized most clearly, I think, in the Earth God's antagonism toward the morally ambiguous and cosmopolitan fox. Yet, unlike the Earth God, Kenji did not cling to the old ways if faced with a chance for positive change, advocating for improved and sustainable agricultural methods. He also wasn't stubbornly traditional. One of his most famous poems is written almost entirely in katakana, a phonetic Japanese alphabet, which would have made his poems more accessible to the less educated rural folk. Kenji seems to have understood the way science allowed humans to overreach. In the first story, a rabbit who receives an incredible ability fails to do the right thing. Having this ability to cause change is not what matters, but the character of the agent in possession of that ability. In The Tale of the White Elephant, Ozbel, the owner, continues to give the elephant human possessions it doesn't need, but each of them are heavy and make the elephant's work more cumbersome because its work has become unnatural. Ozbel's family and human workers can see what's happening, but they're either powerless to stop it or simply too comfortable and therefore apathetic. They can see that the elephant will die, but they remain passive because it's safe and easy, allowing tragedy to occur in slow motion. I wonder if Kenji felt this way about modernization, that it was a miracle and a tragedy happening slowly, improving lives but at a tremendous cost. Yet ensuring that our power of creation is not a curse but a blessing is the responsibility of each person. What each person does turns this world either into a heaven or a hell. Art, poetry, music, cinema, medicine, and transportation are all products of human ingenuity. They filled the world with beauty, health, and comfort, connecting people across cultures and time. The protagonist is Kenji's image of a hero. Unremarkable and inconspicuous in all things, he does good without drawing attention to himself or having expectations. Called a fool by everyone, neither praised nor blamed. Such a person I wish to become.